Welcome back to the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased except ours. I'm Colin.
I'm Craig.
Yes.
And I'm Daniel.
Okay. So we're stepping away from Venom for a little bit. One being that Venom 3, as it's recording, hasn't come out yet. I don't think it's coming out for like another week or so. So we decided to do something that Daniel's been wanting to do for quite some time, and that's talk about some of the Universal original monster movies that came out back in the 30s and whatnot. So today we're going to be talking about Dracula from 1931 and Frankenstein from 1931. Starting with Dracula. Gentlemen, what did you think of Dracula?
I mean, you have to understand this movie came out, it was in 1931.
Almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, so I I liked it enough, but you also there's some of that old charm and stuff. I understand that's an older movie, like it's obviously some of the special effects, it's black and white, doesn't hold up to some stuff today, but for what it was, I think it was good.
Daniel.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed it a lot more than I remember. Like as a kid, like I loved all the Universal movies, but Dracula I always found was my least favorite, but rewatching it again, I enjoyed it. Obviously like Craig was saying, you have to keep it within its time, but I found myself charmed by their practical effects as well as the style of the filmmaking, and how they were, in the acting style of that time. So,
Yeah, I thought so. There's a couple things that always made me chuckle with this movie because this is the first time I've ever seen it. I've always known about them, so I'm not like some brain dead idiot that didn't know these existed. I always knew about them, but they would never really interest me to watch them too much. But I chuckled every time they had that close up of Dracula with the lights clearly on his eyes.
yeah.
Two separate lights on his eyes.
You
I
try
thought
hypnotize them.
Yeah, I thought, as you guys were saying, that yes, it is almost a product of its time because, you can't, it's not a one-to-one comparison comparing a modern movie. Like, if there was a modern Dracula and you compare it to that, it's unfair. I think it was definitely better than Nosferatu. I did see that years and years ago, and Nosferatu is a silent movie, and it is essentially the story of Dracula, but they changed a bunch of names. Like, I forget what Renfield's name is, but Dracula in that movie is Count Orlok.
Hmm.
So I thought this was way better than Nosferatu, because at
Yeah.
least this one, I think, is shorter than Nosferatu, and it has sound in it. Oddly enough, though, there is zero music in this movie besides the
Mhm.
opening credits.
Yeah.
It's very
Really, didn't
atmospheric.
notice that.
But it plays well into it, especially when Renfield first meets Dracula, and it's just that long shot of him coming down the stairs, and there's no sound to it whatsoever. It's just him just walking down the stairs, but it plays well into it. They're able to utilize it to their advantage to like play into the eeriness of Dracula, that the uneasiness of him. But yeah, the no music, I forgot, because in later ones they have the soundtracks for them, like the typical like orchestra style. But this one I didn't that was something that I didn't remember about it, was no music. But I liked it though, the no music aspect.
Yeah, it was definitely different, but yeah, I thought it was fine for it. Worked for this.
Yeah, or like when after Renfield talks with the villagers and they're like, warning him about Dracula, and then it shows Dracula and his brides for the first time, and it's just that slow walk and then that close up of Dracula just with the eyes, like, and his brides walking. Um, I find myself chuckling at it, but I also like can, if you were a person at the time, like it is eerie. It plays into it.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to what the audience reaction was back then, because do you guys know this movie called the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
No.
It
No.
came out, I think, 1918 or 1920. It's another silent film, but they said that there's this one scene where I forget what the premise of the movie is. I did see it, but I saw it for like some film class. And when there's like this big reveal of who the killer is, like you see his eyes, apparently the whole audience just like screamed. And that's a silent film too, with like music and whatnot. I forget what the context was, but I remember reading that. Oh, it's from 1920.
Mm. Well, there's a when we get to Frankenstein, there's something like that. There's a scene like that. But we'll get there.
We get there. When we get there.
So my point being is that like obviously what we find funny now is definitely like more suspenseful and scary for that time.
Yeah. Well, I think just going back and watching these movies, obviously it's very like it's that nostalgic feeling, and obviously now being almost a century later, people or different films have like played off of like that foundation or made it like stereotypes, and you see like other movies build upon it. But um, like we've become so desensitized, like now they show everything in movies and even TV shows.
Yeah, they did not show
Um,
Dracula dying. It was all off screen.
yeah,
Most of the
even
stuff. Yeah.
even his kills, the bites, everything was off scene. Like every time he went to go bite for someone, they'd show the close up of his face, and then it fades to black, and then it just picks up. And I
Even
also
like
like,
Renfield too. Like him eating bugs, I think was like, oh god, that's probably bad for the time.
yeah, but
Like his bat transformations are all off screen.
yeah,
I think also I really liked in the beginning to the matte paintings, clear as day, but it's still so great, and it's you wish movies had that kind of not aesthetic, but that like craftsmanship. Because I think originally we talked about months and months ago, we wanted to do the Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, and apparently that movie has a bunch of like almost all of the effects are in camera.
yeah.
So it's like it harkens back to that craftsmanship era, I
Mm.
guess. I like the matte paintings, and then they not bleed, they blend it in with live action.
I feel like it always just holds up well too, because even you see more modernish movies like Lord of the Rings had matte paintings and it still holds up well.
Yeah, and like
Like
the
paintings and
miniatures.
miniatures.
I mean, you could tell that was a completely miniature boat because you could see the size of the rain
Well, the
droplets.
technology has gotten better,
Oh, I
Yeah,
know.
but I feel like
yeah.
it holds up better.
A drop
It's
that
cra-
was like the size of the whatever the big sail of the boat.
I also like I find it charming the big set pieces too that they use. Obviously they have the backdrops, but like I always like especially the shot of like when Renfield first comes into the castle. Yeah, I just they have the cobwebs. They have like all the live animals running around. Like they don't they it and it plays to its strength of these movies where they were limited, but I felt like they were able to very much show not tell, or they didn't treat like the audiences like idiots, where it was kind of like, oh yeah, it's heavily implied what happened, and in the next scene time passes without them having to like tell you, it's kind of revealed or heavily implied. It's very simple, but I feel like I appreciate that. I feel like movies now, it's like just especially really bad ones. It's just exposition dump after exposition dump. There's always that 5-10 minute scene, like Godzilla X Kong, where Rebecca Hall is just
Don't
exposition.
talk about that movie. You're gonna make me mad.
Movie that shall not be named.
It's crazy to think too. Like this movie's is almost 100 years old, but it's even older than the original King Kong. Because King Kong came out in what 33?
1933.
Yeah.
What's crazy is like the likes of Nosferatu is 102 years old.
Yeah, they're coming out the new one this year. Actually,
Yeah, I saw the trailer in the theaters. Obviously,
I
I don't
always
think
thought
we
it
could.
was
Oh yeah, you go, Craig.
I always thought it was funny how, when people do Dracula, they always have the exaggerated accent, like, I want to suck your blood, all that corny stuff. Then you watch the movie and it's pretty toned down. I mean, obviously, he has an accent because the actor's from another country, but
He's Hungarian, I think.
Yeah.
well, but the point is like it wasn't as exaggerated as it becomes now, where people have like it's over the top and like it's almost like they sit like they're singing when they talk. They have like the
Well,
up and down when they're talking.
isn't it kind of due to that Sesame Street Count, whatever his name is?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
he gets it from
Yeah,
this movie.
but like you said, it's not over the top. It's not like he's singing in an operatic voice.
Almost like, but now most adaptations they have his voice all like up exaggerated, it's up and down.
I was
Yeah.
doing my very little research on Wikipedia, and I saw somewhere that said Christopher Lee, who did end up playing Dracula sometime later, did not like Bela Lugosi as Dracula.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I forget what article it was that I was reading. Let me see if I can go through my history. I don't want to misquote Sir Christopher Lee,
Spreading
but
some
I
misinformation.
think he said he thought it was silly. It was something along those lines that he just thought it was silly. Is it this? Was it on Bela Lugosi's Wikipedia page, or was it on Dracula? Because I did read also Gary Oldman. He based his performance off of Bela Lugosi.
Well, I know this. So, obviously this and Frankenstein, two, of the big three, the Universal monsters, Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, and then Creature came much later, after them. But he still put in with them. These two are directly off of a literary source. Like Wolfman and Creature aren't, and then the Mummy I think is just myth, and but yeah, but they based this movie was off of the play production of the book.
Oh, I guess that kind of makes sense because
Yeah.
I mean, granted, the movies were different, but like, they had like sets that you can kind of film anywhere because
Yeah.
a lot of scenes were like in rooms, people just talking.
Yeah.
Well, it's always
And
interesting too, because Craig, you mentioned I think earlier about. Did you mention that it was kind of like a play, like just the
No,
way?
they don't just said that.
Well, no. Not, he said it's based off the play, which I know, but like the movie itself, the way the people are acting is like a play.
A little bit, yeah, because they're all like just kind of standing around like in one room.
Well, yeah, that's how directing was back then, because they didn't really. All those directors came from the theater world, and they didn't
Yeah.
really know what to do when they have a camera.
It makes sense. I mean, it was that's why you got to give this movie a bit of slack. 'Cause it's when you're the first people doing something like the pioneers, like they have no one to go off of, so they're just like, well, let's see if this works.
Yeah. And like all the it's always funny too, like they all talk the same, like all the or the way they deliver their drastic or dramatic lines, it feels like it's straight out of a play. It's that very I don't want to say like Shakespearean, but it's
Shatnerian.
yeah.
Okay, so I found the quote actually. And Christopher Lee, it says, who played Dracula in a series of Hammer movies, said, anyhow, about the Lugosi Dracula, I was so disappointed. I absolutely have been wanting to see it for a long, long time. There are aspects of it, for instance, that I consider ridiculous. Dracula is played too nice at the beginning, particularly no menace in the character. There is no shock or fright in it. Lugosi's hands, too. He held them out stiffly, making him look like a puppet. His smile was not always sinister either. Yeah.
I mean,
Did he see it like
yes.
did he see it like later, like after other iterations of Dracula had come out, like technology gotten better? Because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he saw like later Draculas.
He saw like
I
40
don't know
years
when
later.
he said it.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like he saw it like not within its like time.
Well, he was alive when it came out.
Okay, yeah, but he's alive. But was he like 5 or
He
how
would have
old
been
was he?
9.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Well, let's see.
He's-
When did he play Dracula?
I think he was like in the 70s, 60s or 70s,
Oh, 58.
58.
Dracula.
yeah, but still, like how much the movie industry had changed in
Yeah, I mean they.
that time period.
Yeah, I mean if you wanted to compare it to the book, it is different. Like They're very
Did you
noticeably
guys
different.
read anything from the book?
I did not, but the GF did. And she was
Oh.
telling me about some of the differences, and I should have been paying
Yeah.
more attention.
Well, what are some of the
Well,
differences you know of?
so I know it's not Renfield that goes to visit Dracula in the beginning. It's Harkin.
I think
Harkin
that's how it
is
was in Nosferatu.
so Harkin is the he goes to settle the real estate matter and stuff like that, and he spends some time with Dracula, and that's where he notices like this guy's not normal, some unsettling things about him, and then Renfield has I think the whole time was in the psych ward. Dracula was just sending him like bugs and stuff to eat. So he always kind of had him under his control. Like Renfield was just there. Like he was always insane. Um, the ship's name, it's not. What was it in the movie? Was what Veta or Vorta, something like that. In the book, it's the Dementor.
That was the Demeter, like.
Yeah, Demeter, Dementor. Yeah, the Demeter because it was based off of a Russian ship.
Oh, I thought it was from the Greek goddess. Anyway,
the ship's name was different. They did get that part minus Renfield being on the ship, and then laughing as the camera just zoomed in on him. Dracula did kill that whole crew, but they found it in the book. It was Mina and her friend Lucy. They were walking and they saw the wreckage of the ship, and then obviously the police came and they did find like the captain was tied like with a crucifix to the wheel, and everyone like the rest of the crew was just gone. So Dracula picked them off. Lucy did get turned in the movie or in the book, but Van Helsing also didn't come in until midway through, and him and like Harkin them they killed Lucy in the book because there was reports of her like beating on children in the night, like the woman in white.
What?
That was in the book, and then they ended up killing her. But she didn't get turned right away. It was like kind of a slow burn, and the same with like Mina. And Dracula's brides had a more prominent role in the book because the one night almost killed Harkin, and then Dracula said no, he's mine, but then Harkin escaped, climbing down the castle. What else?
See, I'd be curious to see the Bram Stoker's Dracula because to my knowledge, that seems like it's more accurate.
I think it's a pretty close representation of it, but I don't know if I want to see Keanu Reeves try to do an English accent.
he's really not a good actor.
Well, he's never been a good actor. He's just a really good guy.
Apparently, he knows how to do good action movies. Apparently, so
because he doesn't really talk in them.
Hey, you got to give him credit. He plays to his strengths, then.
Yeah. Not hating on him.
Yeah, but and then in the book, so one thing that was different, a big difference that this movie started about vampires that the book didn't, was vampires not being able to go out in sunlight, because in the book, Dracula, and this was in Bram Stoker's Dracula in the 90s, he can go out in daylight. It's just he's depowered, like he's weaker in daylight, but he still could go out in sunlight. So this one kind of started that trend of vampires having that weakness. And then in the end of the book, they did corner Dracula. Like they cut him off though, like where his coffin was, and I think it was Harkin and Dr. Seward that stabbed him. But Van Helsing, he didn't come in until like kind of midway. If I remember correctly, he didn't come in until like midway through, and his whole they killed Lucy. but Lucy got turned first, and then Mina. So and then Renfield, he kind of wasn't as big.
Does Dracula kill him in the novel too?
I don't remember, but I just remember he was just insane. Like he was in the psych ward eating bugs. But yeah, that was one of the bigger changes is Renfield replacing Harkin's part in the beginning.
Well, I was gonna say, just talking about Van Helsing for a sec, because I remember all, like in movies now and adaptations now, they think of Van Helsing as a vampire slayer. Like his
He's
mortal
some
enemy is
guy.
Dracula. Yeah, he's just some really smart guy who's like, you know what? I think this guy's a vampire. I'm well read. I know the lore behind it. I think he's a vampire. Let's go with it.
Still, the best scene is when Dracula tries to get him to submit to his will, and he goes at him and he pulls out the crucifix.
Well, I just like also the over the top, like when Van Helsing uses the cigarette box mirror, and then Dracula's not in it, and then Dracula just like aggressively smacks it away, so over the top, like not even trying to be inconspicuous.
And I love too. It's like Dracula, like he just admitted to them, like, "Oh," they're like, "Oh, Dracula, what's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, he'll explain to you. Like, he's gonna reveal to you I'm a vampire, but I'm gonna come back anyway." Like they're like almost gentlemen about it. Like he still comes in and talks with them. Like,
So is Van Helsing like an older man in the novel? Because like Craig said, everyone when you hear the name Van Helsing, you think of like some vampire killer with a crossbow running around.
Well, like
yeah, they
the
think
movie
of
Van Helsing.
yeah, they think of huge Jackman running around.
Well, even in Billy and Mandy, remember
Yeah,
Van Helsing? He was the old guy. Like they're both mortal enemies.
I don't remember what he looks like in Billy and Mandy, if I'm being honest.
I think
He
in
had
the
like the
I
hat
think
and the beard.
in the books he was an older guy. I don't know how old, but he was older. Um, but yeah, the book was much more like
Seems it's
dark.
more violent.
Yeah, dark and violent than the but that's the thing about like these, when Lee's like, "Oh, it seems silly," but it's like, well, they can't truly get into the character because like at the time, what it was, the FCC had a very tight grip on like what could be shown to all. Yeah, like it was very tight on what could be shown to the audiences and stuff. So they had to play around with it.
Yeah, it's not like today where you can show all that smut and violence and gore.
I like the scenes when Renfield gives himself a paper cut. It just shows Dracula just staring at the blood.
Yeah, well, that honestly felt like something out of Austin Powers, like Dr. Evil looking at something, like when Dr. Evil was looking at the mole on Number 3's face. Like Dracula had that same expression, but that was from Nosferatu, actually. That wasn't in the book. I saw on the Wikipedia page.
Mole, bloody mole.
I again, like I also too, like it's meant to work out more as a play, so Dracula trying to be unsettling, but he also is like, it's in that theater style, so it comes off a little more over the top, but I still I can only imagine, like, especially like what else what were American audiences really subjected to. So I feel like for the time this would have been very kind of unsettling. Just like the silence and him just staring.
Well, like in Nosferatu, like how could, because I think they renamed him to Thomas Hutter, and he's based off of Harkin. It's like, how can he think this? Like Nosferatu looks like a complete creature. It doesn't even, at least Bela Lugosi's Dracula looks like a regular guy. Like Count Orlok just looks like an ogre, like a tall, misfigured ogre.
Because that's the thing about and that's like with Dracula, he's supposed to be somewhat unsettling, but also there's like a magnetism to him. Like where Lucy in this movie is like, "Oh, I find him fascinating. Like he has the accent. He's a count." So there is something unsettling about him. But like at first, there's something also to be like compelling about him, which I think this, Lugosi played, like he has a charm to him. So for its time, I think that role, he played it well. Yeah, Orlok is just like a creature, just some elf-eared, buck-toothed, bald guy going in the shadows.
Yeah, you forgot the word pale because he's like super white. It's like, how could you think that looks like a regular guy? Like, as soon as if I saw that immediately, I'd be like, yeah, I'm out of here.
If I remember reading about this correctly, I think Nosferatu, like there was like some copyright issues with it
Oh, they
because
got
like
sued, and then they
yeah,
were ordered
because
to
like
destroy everything.
because it was like unauthorized. It was an unauthorized ripoff of Dracula. They tried to like change the names and everything, and they were like, no, no, no.
Yeah, that's why the movie was considered lost for a while because they were ordered to destroy every copy.
Yeah, but yeah, and like I think with Dracula, as a kid, like obviously, like the Wolfman and Frankenstein, they were always more like cooler creatures to me. Like I think like modern times with vampires, like where they can have powers and be more like shifty, like it's more appealing. Like so, like rewatching Dracula, I liked it because I just love the Universal movies. Um, but with Dracula, he's of the big three. Like I feel like he's the most like boring out of them, especially when they're limited by their time. But I still enjoyed like the movie itself, though.
Yeah, I liked it too. Of course, it doesn't help that we live in 2024, and this movie came out in 1931. Things have changed, but I think it holds up pretty well.
Imagine if Zack Snyder wrote a Dracula movie,
Oh my god, there'd be so much blood and gore and nudity
and
and violence. I like implied violence in movies sometimes.
yeah,
That's
and,
more haunting.
and that's what I
You're
like.
left to your devices and imagining what they did to this one person.
Yeah. I like too. It's like in this, they don't even like do the makeup or a close up on like, oh, you have bite marks, and it's just like everyone looks and then that's it. Like they don't even do a close up. No makeup on it. It's just like,
She had a scarf and she was covering it.
yeah, they just show the the like normal shot of Van Helsing looking at it, and then that's it. I can appreciate that because you can just you don't have to show everything or like gore porn just for the sake of it. Just it's fine.
Yeah.
No, you must show everything.
Less is
Yeah.
All of
often
it.
better sometimes, especially in
Yeah.
horror.
And that's why I've come to like appreciate these, like rewatching these movies. I appreciate it that it's simple. Sure, it can be over the top with the style of acting, and it's charming with its limited technology. But I can also appreciate the simplicity that they get the point across, and also too, like these movies were not long, barely over an hour, and they can tell a full story.
Which is beautiful for watching.
Yeah. And especially when there's like 30 plus of these, including their sequels and stuff. If you want to watch all of them, it's crazy. You could watch like 40 of them. It would take you what, a little under 2 days.
Yeah, if you watch them all straight.
I mean, you can do it. Just use a little like
Have you
nose
seen
powder.
all of the Universal Dracula ones?
No. So I'd seen the original. I've seen. I saw so I've seen him, Bud Abbott and Lou Costello meet Frankenstein, which has the three of them in it, including Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney, but Karloff after the first three was done playing the monster. I've seen the three Frankenstein ones with Karloff. He did a trilogy. Seen Wolfman meets Frankenstein. There's House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula. Those ones have it because then in the 40s they started doing a lot of the crossovers. After Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, they started then bringing all the monsters together.
The original MCU.
Yeah, seriously. So I've seen him. I've seen the original Dracula, but I didn't. I don't know if I'd seen like one of his after it, but I always saw him more like when he was with the other monsters. Because I always found them more interesting.
Right. Is the creature from the Black Lagoon based off of anything like a novella, short story, or is that original too?
I think he's original too.
Wow.
Unless you
Interesting.
want unless you want to count The Shape of Water.
Oh no, The Shape of Water is based off of this. Yeah, I think it's original.
Yeah.
Doesn't have on Wikipedia based on, it says story by and screenplay by.
Yeah. So Wolfman, and obviously Wolfman has the mythology, but there's no direct literary source for it. And then because they did Werewolf of London, I think came out in 35, and then Wolfman didn't come out till 1941, and then Creature didn't come out until the early 50s.
Yeah,
So
54.
yeah. And the one that they always keep showing, even though she's barely in anything, is the Bride of Frankenstein. You would think like she's this prominent character, but
Is she barely in the movie?
so she's in the second movie, Bride of Frankenstein, which is might be the best Universal movie in terms of like just a solid, just like overall movie.
Really?
Yeah, it's like I personally love the movie. I think it's a great sequel. It's definitely better than Son of Frankenstein by a mile. And honestly, I think I might enjoy it more than the first Frankenstein. And the reason for that, I mean, unless we're going to cover it, but is so Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. All of it comes from the book. Like it's essentially different pieces of the book put into two movies.
What?
Uh,
Bride of Frankenstein's in the original book?
well, so she never. So in are we going to transition over to
Yeah, I was going
Frankenstein
to say
now?
that this would be a nice segue then into Frankenstein, which came out after Dracula in 1931. And yeah, Daniel, you continue.
Yeah. So elements from the book are in both Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. So Frankenstein, just in general, this movie is drastically like there's a big difference. I feel a much more noticeable difference between the movie and the book, especially to just start off.
Monster. It's the
Well,
biggest
the
difference.
monster. Yeah,
Well,
because
that's what I was told too. Like Dracula, obviously it's not one to one, but it was closer to the book than this one. It's not as close.
So
yeah.
again, before you
yeah.
go, because I know you have a lot to say, my input will be that the little research I did again, because I looked up the book on Wikipedia, and it's broken up into narrative acts, where I think one of them, like the first part is Dr. Frankenstein, no, Captain Walton, then the other one's Victor Frankenstein, then it cuts back to the creature who is capable of sentient thought.
Yep.
The novel follows him and his thoughts and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then it cuts back to Frankenstein's narrative, and then Captain Walton concludes it. So I
Yeah.
had no idea that Frankenstein was, not Frankenstein, the monster was some,
Yeah.
creature capable of thought and emotion.
Yeah.
And I think it said also in the Wikipedia that he's saddened when Victor dies. Like the
Well,
creature is
Yeah.
expresses emotion. He's not some like Sylvester Stallone sounding meathead creature.
Which just off of his, I still loved his design. I thought he
Oh,
looked
it's
cool.
iconic. It's easily
Yeah.
iconic.
Yeah. Which, and it's also much more appealing than what if they did the book's description of him.
Well, did you ever see? I looked it up too, where they're on the internet. People make like artist interpretations based off the book's description.
Yeah.
Craig, if you haven't done that already, I compel you to do that real quick so you can see what the book.
Are you like
looks
Dracula? I compel you.
So tell you what, Frankenstein creature.
Just look up Frankenstein accurate depiction, and then it's some long-haired person whose skin's like dried up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of expected, right? Yeah, like the wonky eyes. Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
he put like dead body parts together, right? So
Yeah. So, I guess diving into it.
Yeah, you can cook now, Daniel.
and there's some Chad.
Giga Chad Frankenstein. Chadenstein.
Boo.
So yeah, so this one is much more different. Well, first off, they swap names of Victor and his friend.
Well, that's
His
Henry,
friend,
this one, right?
yeah, yeah. In the book, his friend is Henry, and it's Victor Frankenstein. Um, and then he doesn't. So the brain thing in the movie is not at all in the book. Like
Yeah.
the movie tries to portray it like it's a essentially the creature. There's a distinction like goodwill and um, it's like nature instead of nurture. Where the book is much more about the monster's hor it's not really the monster's fault, and he's horribly misunderstood. Where this one, it's kind of like, well, he is a monster because you gave him a criminal brain, which I thought that scene was always so funny because it's like he hears a gong for some reason, drops the brain. Um, so yeah, in the movie, he meant to give him a good brain, and then he gives him the brain of a criminal. So the monster kind of always has that evil nature in him, but he's still kind of misunderstood. He has the potential for good, but he's so in the book, also side note, did you guys notice? And it's funny too, because like my dad and I would always talk about like you always see the same kind of actors in these movies. The guy who played Renfield was his assistant in this movie. If you didn't
Yeah, and
notice,
then Van Helsing was in it as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
Dr.
Yeah.
Waldman. Oh, real quick before
Yeah.
you continue. I chuckled in the opening credits when it just said the monster. Didn't even have an actor's name, just had a question mark. That made me,
I know.
that got a chuckle out of me. All right, you can continue.
I was gonna say I also like the opening scene is like someone at a play coming out behind the curtains and
Oh yeah,
explaining
that was
it.
actually very odd. I was like, "What is
Yeah.
this?"
I kind of liked it, like the way he's trying to like scare the audience a little. But yeah, so in the movie, they have the brain. He has the assistant. Neither of those are in the book. He is engaged to Elizabeth, and his whole thing is he didn't. He got the body parts from it was like graveyards and also like slaughterhouses. I think there was like animal parts too. It was more grotesque.
We do a little grave robbing.
Yeah, just a little. I had the Justice League did it, so
True.
yeah. So he assembles the creature by himself, and in the book, that's the thing is the movie. It's a slight difference. The movie, it's the monster, Frankenstein's monster. In the book, he's only ever referred to as the creature, and he makes some, and they didn't explicitly say that it was electricity. It was like this. They just called like the spark of life, kind of a deal. And the whole thing is that the creature, essentially, when Victor makes him, and then when he first sees him alive, he is so horrified by the sight of him. Victor just abandons him. He just runs and flees. He just leaves the creature like as he is. And then, so the creature now abandoned kind of has to go out into the world by himself like a child. And, in the book, he's 8 feet tall. They said like his skin is like stretched, like it's like so tight, like it doesn't really distinguish where like muscle and like organs are. So he's way more grotesque. He's 8 feet tall, has like the long black hair. I think they said he has like black lips too, and pale like yellowish
like watery
skin.
eyes too.
Yeah, and like glowing watery eyes. So he's much more grotesque looking. And when he goes out into the world, you find out later that obviously he's rejected by humanity, chased and beaten and stuff like that. So I guess to how the book, it starts off with Frankenstein. He's in the Arctic and he comes across this ship that's got stuck in the ice. He meets the captain and he's about to essentially die. So he's telling the captain his whole story and he's recounting everything, how he came to make the creature. So after he gives his backstory, he makes the creature. He flees, and then if you find out that his like little brother, like he had his son, and they did a Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in the 90s with De Niro. It's more accurate to the book.
Really?
His like
I didn't know that.
mm-hmm.
What did he look like?
He it's not that scary. He just looks like a stitched person, like in the face. That's about it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's
he
so much
does.
effort for these actors to put on makeup.
Yeah. But so what happens is Frankenstein goes back. He's like trying to forget about everything, and then he finds out that his like younger brother, like a child, got murdered, and he fears it's the monster. Um, and then he goes, I think, into the French or Swiss Alps. I think it's the Swiss Alps, just to get away from everything, and like just and the creature finds him on the mountain, and he talks with him, and then that's where it cuts that part of the creature in the book where now the creature is telling him about what happened after he abandoned him, and they're having this full-fledged conversation. So the creature learned to talk. So he went out into the woods because he was,
But
he
then
was
he
getting run
learned
out.
how to speak like in a barn. I think I read that
So,
somewhere.
so
No,
yeah, no, it was a
He learned how to speak
It was
another
a family.
language.
It was a
Oh,
family. No, so he taught himself how to like read and everything, but how he learned how to like talk and like essentially read was because he went out into the like he was done with humanity. They were running him out of town, like going after him. So he went into the woods to be alone, and that's how he taught himself like how to eat, like berries and stuff like that. And then he came across this cabin, and this family owned this cabin in the woods, and so all he did is he would just hang by it, and he would just listen to them, and he taught himself how to speak from them, how to read, and stuff like that, because Frankenstein, um, the only thing that the monster had on him was Frankenstein's jacket that he grabbed before he left the lab, and in it was like books and like notes. So he taught himself how to read. He taught himself how to speak by listening to those people. And then it was this family where they, it was, and this is also part in the Bride of Frankenstein too. It was this family, the dad or something, like he was blind, so the kids went away and stuff. And Frankenstein, the creature, every so often would bring them firewood, unbeknownst to them, but he would drop it off for them and stuff just to take care of them. And eventually the kids went, and the dad, he was there, and so the monster wanted to, finally had the courage to go talk to him. So he went, and the guy was blind, so he didn't see what he looked like, and they actually were like getting along. The family comes back, horrified by the creature. They scare him off. So, now he's, the creature's like angry, and so he wants to take revenge on Frankenstein. So he tracked down his little brother and murdered him. And then, he tracked down Frankenstein. So the whole thing, and then he said to Frankenstein he's like, I don't want anything to do with humanity. I'm tired of them. You abandoned me. Like, and he quotes, I think, Dante's Inferno or something like that, or Paradise
I think it was
Lost.
Paradise Lost.
He's like, I was meant to be like your Adam, but I ended up being your Lucifer or something like that. And so, and that's where some movies have given the name Adam because of that. But so then he tells Frankenstein, he's like, listen, I don't want anything to do with humanity. He goes, but I don't want to be alone. So make me a bride, like make me a companion. We'll go off to the most remote part of the world, and we'll live in peace, and we'll be done. So Frankenstein agreed to it just to like get the creature away from him, and he was doing that, and he was making the bride, and then the creature would come and check up on him, and he essentially threatened him. He's like, if you don't follow through with this, I'll haunt you. So then Frankenstein had made everything was all set up and everything, but the thought of like them possibly procreating, or like a race of the creature, like a race of him existing, freaked him out. So he ended up destroying the companion, Frankenstein's bride, the creature's bride. And then so in revenge, the creature killed his best friend, visited him on his wedding night after they got married, and murdered Elizabeth.
my
And
God.
then and then Frankenstein wanted to get revenge on the creature, so he followed him like throughout. It says, he followed him all the way to the Arctic on a chase, and then that's where he lost him in the storm. But he came across the ship, and then that's where he was telling the whole story. And then when he died, the creature showed up, and he told the captain like and he wept over his body, and that's where he was like he was the only family I had technically. So that's why he wept over him, because it wasn't like oh I love him, but he was essentially his creator, like his father, and then the creature at the end of it, once they bury Frankenstein, or oh no, it wasn't, they didn't bury him. The creature took a torch, I think they like set his body out like
Vikings
to see, and then the creature was like, yeah, I'm gonna go like somewhere and die. So it's a much more tragic story, and the creature is a much more tragic character. So I get why they, in the first movie, like the way they framed it like this, to make him kind of just, somewhat sympathetic, but not as tragic, because the book, he's very much more the victim, and like Frankenstein, is much more at fault. But the movie portrays him more as like it was an accident. It was like a mistake. But yeah, so that's the book. And yeah, so the Bride of Frankenstein has those elements. So in the Bride of Frankenstein, it has the scene of him. So
we can do a review on that movie if you want.
But there's certain elements like the blind man, the creature talking, the bride is in it, but so there's elements from the book put into both, essentially.
So I'm looking at the Wikipedia. It says that the movie is based from the 1927 play. I didn't know there was a play, but it just says that in the play, Frankenstein refers to both the scientist and the monster, which is probably where all the confusion comes from. I remember as a kid, those smart kids would come up and say like, "Oh, don't you know the name of the Frankenstein's monster?" And some kid would say Frankenstein, like, "No, it's never named." I hate.
Well,
those
yeah,
kind
it's
of
like one of
kids.
those like reverse.
Colin, I'm right here. You don't have to,
no.
But no, it was, if you're a stickler, it's technically the creature, and like some people try to give him the unofficial name of Adam, but the creature monster, it doesn't matter. But yeah, in the movies they always just refer to it as Frankenstein's monster. Yeah. I guess is that, which sounds scarier as opposed to. I mean, honestly, the creature, it's more ambiguous. Like, what is it? But anyway, so what did you guys think of Frankenstein?
I was going to say about Frankenstein, because I always found the book to be more interesting, because like the title of it's called like Modern Prometheus, which I think many people get lost by that, but I always found that to be a very interesting title for the movie, or not the movie, the book. Like the creation of man, and trying to be God, and the consequences of not knowing what you're doing. Because I know the quoting like said Paradise Lost and maybe Dante's Inferno. I never read the book, but I know.
I think it was Paradise is Lost. Not Dante's Inferno, but I think it was. He definitely quoted Paradise Lost. But yeah, no, and that's something. If they ever do like the '90s one's okay, but because that's still like the way it is, it's almost kind of like a play. But I always liked, especially in the book, I always found that would be such a great scene if like done. I think that's something you could do even like almost per beat from the book is, the conversation of of the creature and Frankenstein on a mountain just talking. Like, I think that would be such a great scene. But.
Oh, don't worry, basically like a quip, it'd be like something that would be talking all serious. Oh boy, isn't this weird, huh? Me and this monster talking. That just happened.
Still think you're the only monster in the world?
Yeah, they'd have Tom Holland in that movie making quips.
Yeah, no, except if Tom Holland was in the movie, Tom Holland would have been Frankenstein's son, having to fight Frankenstein's, because essentially like Iron Man's villains, he'd have to fight his father's villains.
Yeah, probably. And he has like some kind of Frankenstein tech, like Frankenstein armor.
Oh man,
So you're
Frankenstein
part
tech.
animal and human?
Frankenstein tech.
you got bolts coming out of your neck, dude. That's so cool.
That is awesome, man.
You have the strength of 10 men.
Whoa.
So stupid.
But what did I guess? But what did you think of? What did you guys think of the movie?
I definitely didn't think it was as good as Dracula. Plus, I know more about the Frankenstein book than Dracula. So when I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, this is clearly not trying to adapt the book at all.
So you liked Dracula better than Frankenstein?
Yeah.
I
Mainly
think I
because I
agree
know
with
more about
Craig.
the
The
book.
book sounds so much more interesting, and even it has a voice of what it's trying. Like you know what the book is trying to say and whatnot, and the movie's nothing like that.
Yeah.
Frankenstein's monster is just some like
But I will
slowly
say, I did
walking.
like the way he moved. He
Yeah.
definitely moved weird. I mean, especially for like, actors
Well, it
back
said his
then.
shoes were 13 pounds each.
Well, I'm saying, but they put in
Yeah.
the effort. Movies today, you'd have to hire like some specialist. Otherwise, the actor's like, I'm not doing that.
Well, and it's also too. I think like I like the monster. Yeah, I think his design's cool. I liked Karloff as him. Like the little nuances in him not being able to speak, but and he had that deadpan look in his eyes too. Like when he first
The
introduced him,
dead.
and they do that close up, and he's just like dead in the eyes. Like I thought Karloff was great as the monster. Um, and I think if you watch other sequels or other movies from Universal in this time span of without Karloff as the monster, there's no one that comes close to like how he actually plays the monster because everyone else you probably which you probably see now like the different iterations where people like the monster has his hands out like walks very slow, eyes are closed almost like at least I appreciate about Karloff is that he moved like when he's running he's actually agile like he and even when he fights with people, he's actually fighting like a person as opposed to like you'll see other ones like where he's just like swinging his hands like he's doing a bad sprinkler dance move. Like he just like they look so stiff, but at least like this with Karloff as the monster, like he actually like brought no pun intended brought life to the monster, like where he's he
But
can move.
Yeah,
No, I mean really no pun intended, but like when you compare him to all the other different ones in Universal, he's by far and away the best. Especially in Bride, where he can, he learns to talk and he's on the run and stuff like that. He's easily the best part. But yeah, but the book is very much more interesting. Especially like just an 8 foot tall like they did like an accurate depiction, he'd be horrifying. This one he looks more cool though.
yeah, this one is definitely iconic for a reason, but it's like the movie misses the point of what the book was trying to say, like entirely.
Yeah, yeah, because
which is why I definitely prefer like the book, and I felt good again, like some more interesting story to tell than. Granted, it was based off a play. I don't know if they probably read the book or there could have been limitations with makeup and maybe some of the
I
censor stuff.
I doubt the code the film code would have allowed an accurate depiction of the creature in 1931.
Well, could they even achieve that look with makeup? Is the real question.
Probably not. They probably would have just done like maybe a few stitches on his face, very pale like powder, and then like long black hair. And maybe like an eye, maybe done the like Dracula eye effect, like light effect on his eyes to try to make him glow. But that probably would have been their closest thing to to the book at the time because, I mean, the one thing I'd mentioned before, like them something being too shocking to the audience. So if you if you watch, I think now it's fine because it doesn't matter. But originally, I think when they released the film, so that scene with the girl and the flowers, they show him like now when if you get on like Amazon Prime or Peacock or you have like the collection, they show him tossing the girl in the water. I think originally when they showed that, they had to cut it because they were afraid that would have been too horrifying to the audience, showing a girl getting tossed and drowned.
I forget what I was gonna say.
Well,
Oh,
just
did you
funny how
guys
things change.
did you guys
Yeah,
look up what the Thomas Edison version of Frankenstein looks like from
He made a
1910?
movie.
It was a little short. I think it's the first on-screen adaptation of Frankenstein. Just look up Frankenstein Thomas Edison,
oh
and
my
it just looks
god.
like this
It
weird.
looks like a comedy.
Yeah, from 1910. I don't even know how to describe that thing. It's only 16 minutes long. Yeah, this looks. I don't even know what that thing looks like. Interesting though. Karloff's interpretation of Frankenstein is iconic for a reason. Like, look at this mess.
People don't know that Thomas Edison, I think he was one of the pioneers of movies. It was like the first movie studio in New Jersey, right?
I don't know. I know it's one of the first cameras he used. Forget
Well,
what
because
it was.
everyone likes to dump on Thomas Edison, like, oh, he didn't know anything. No, he invented a lot of stuff. He was actually a smart man, just a little ruthless, but he did make a lot of useful stuff.
I think it was called like the Kintogram or something like that with the camera that he used. I can't find it on the
There's also the iconic "It's alive! It's alive!"
Oh, yeah.
I can't find what camera was used.
Oh yeah, like every movie now, they to bring something to life, they'll roll it up to the sky and then it gets struck by lightning. I mean, how many
Yeah,
times have you seen that in the movie?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, while the book is better, this movie still is iconic for a reason. It has its moments that other movies still take from, and and obviously this iteration of this monster's design is stood the test of time as it's essentially been like copied in every iteration. Because yeah, the if you look up De Niro, did you guys look up De Niro's
Yeah,
monster?
it looks silly.
Yeah, he's just stitched. Like but at least this one looks more haunting.
So the thing that Thomas Edison used was a kinetograph. And if you look up a picture of it, it is designed for films to be viewed by one person at a time through a peephole viewer window. It's like this large machine.
Well, yeah, but it was like one of the first cameras invented, though.
Yeah,
It was in 1910.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think he invented one of the first cameras.
No, he didn't, Craig.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I know. It was,
Steve Jobs.
What?
no, it was Nikola Tesla. He invented everything.
Uh,
So what else about Frankenstein, fellas? I was surprised that Victor or Henry survived at the end.
oh, yeah, that part always made me laugh. There's no way that dude
The
survives
movie's
that.
logic is that the windmill broke his fall, even though his back hit it,
Even,
and then he
even
fell on
though
the ground.
no, I think he landed. Did he land on his back or was it
I think
his
he landed on
front?
his back.
No, I mean, like I think when he hit the windmill, wasn't it he hit like his stomach on the windmill? Like,
I thought it was his back. Maybe you're right.
but still, you hit a windmill and then you fall onto the ground. Yeah, come on.
Because I always knew, like, I don't know too much about the book, but I knew that Henry or Victor dies at the end, so I was kind of expecting that. Again, this is also the first time I've seen this thing in full. And
I think it's a happy ending.
I was like, yeah, the creatures is implied to die, but obviously we don't see it escape and whatnot. And as we know, it did escape. But yeah, he gets a happy ending. Isn't he married by that time? Oh yeah, because I think the father says like, "Oh, I hope to become a grandfather soon,"
Yeah,
and Henry is just
yeah,
recuperating
yeah,
in the bed.
Yeah, then, like at the end, like the dad's drinking with all the maids, like, oh yeah, like this monster didn't just kill a little girl and terrorize the town for a bit.
Yeah, he didn't just totally try to play God and create life and the hubris with all that. He gets off scot free.
Yeah,
When he gets married, he's probably very wealthy.
yeah,
Yeah, that made me chuckle at the end. The Henry gets a good ending.
yeah. Because I was even thinking like this. See, this one had to be a bit more shocking to the audience because I can imagine seeing the monster for the first time when he turns around and it zooms in on his face. That probably for its time was a bit jarring, but also too like the concept. Like obviously they don't show it, but they're grave robbing and then they cut down the guy who was hung. They cut his body down and they take it and then they grab they have they take the brain. Like I feel like for that for 1931 that must have been like groundbreaking if you will. And then like implying that a little girl got drowned.
It's funny he just like tossed her in there.
Yeah, because then they showed the dad walking with his daughter's limp body into town. So it's like this one definitely had to be more, um, scary for the audience of the time than Dracula.
Yeah, I can't. Again, like we don't know what it was like seeing that in the theater back then, but this one is definitely like more creepy. And Frankenstein, the creature, is definitely way more intimidating than well-dressed Bela Lugosi is. It's Dracula.
Yeah, because what the he killed. Well, didn't he he killed the assistant. He killed the doc. He killed the doctor, and he killed the little girl. And then he should have killed Frankenstein. When he tossed him off the windmill. Yeah, did he? He choked. Yeah, he used the whip and he killed the assistant with it.
I'd
Remember
be
the
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then the doctor was gonna operate on him to like fix him or like destroy him, I think. And then he wakes up and just grabs him by the throat and chokes him out.
I'd be curious to see like an actual faithful adaptation of the novel of Frankenstein.
Probably never gonna get it.
Probably never will, but I'd be very curious to see one.
Yeah, but
Now, Colin, I have a question for you.
Yes.
After seeing Frankenstein, do you still think he'd be able to fight Baragon?
Ugh. Oh, well, I forget what it was in the movie. I saw that maybe a year ago, and I don't think was he a dead guy in that movie?
I've never
hmm,
seen it.
I don't remember. He was just like some dude who had Boris Karloff's head. I mean, the fact that Baragon's flame breath didn't do anything against Frankenstein in the movie was a little annoying. And that must not have been fun to be that actor playing the Frankenstein. I forget what was it. Ah, so during World War II in Nazi Germany, Nazi officers confiscate the living heart of the Frankenstein monster, and they pass it on to the Imperial Japanese Navy, who take it to a research facility in Hiroshima. As the experiments begin, Hiroshima is destroyed by the Americans by a nuclear bomb. 15 years later, it gets rapidly rebuilt. Okay, so that's what it was. I didn't remember how the monster came to be in that movie.
that's a pretty
Pretty
forgettable
forgettable.
movie.
I remember Nick Adams is in it, right? Yeah, he is. He's like the only American in it.
Was he the same guy that was in War of the Gargantuans?
I don't remember, but he was in Invasion of the Astro Monster.
I don't know. I could have sworn he was in War of the Gargantuans because that was a sequel, technically a sequel to
Oh yeah, to this.
because his cells got put out to sea and then they formed.
I don't think it is. No, I don't see his name listed.
I'm thinking of a different, the other lone American actor in that movie.
Guy's name is Ross Tamblyn. That's who you're
Was
thinking
he?
of.
Wait, I think he was the guy from West Side Story. That's why I
Yeah,
remember.
it says in West Side Story he portrayed Riff, the leader of the Jets gang.
What a career!
Yeah, that's nuts. That's crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, even though comparing the book of Frankenstein to the movie, it's a big difference. I still like it's probably the nostalgic feeling, or and just the design of the monster. I always loved him, but I still enjoy it. It still has that charm of its time and stuff. But I think if you separate the book from it, it's definitely better on its own. But I think when you compare it, it loses ground.
Yeah, it's like if the movie was based off of like an original idea, I think it would fare a lot better. But because it's based off of the novel and what you talked about, what the novel is about and what it's saying, the movie just pales in comparison.
Now, I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know. I should have looked into it more if there was maybe some copyright issues, like if they couldn't fully pull. But I mean, they pull elements from it, so I don't think there would have been a copyright issue. But
No, I'm pretty sure when I was reading it, like Universal paid the money to acquire
yeah,
the rights legally and fully. It's not like Nosferatu.
yeah, yeah. I guess yeah, because if they played out the whole book, it would be a long movie. Which at that time, movies were not going that long.
Yeah, just
Frankenstein.
also again, these movies came out like 100 years ago, so it's a very
Yeah,
different environment.
iconic nonetheless, and enjoyable nonetheless. But I still enjoy it very much. Um,
Well, since you're enjoying it so much, we could do another episode. But before we even talk about that, let's give some final thoughts on the two movies we saw today. Craig, you start first.
Well, like I said before, I liked them. Definitely liked probably Dracula more, not knowing as much about the book. I feel like the Frankenstein story more. And I understand these movies came out 100 years ago. You can't judge them to the full same standards as today. Like they're a product of their time after all.
Daniel.
you already know I'm a nerd about
Yeah.
these, so
Keep cooking. But yeah, I enjoyed them too. Products of their time, but still enjoyable nonetheless. Now, with all of that being said, this has been the Unbiased Opinion, where everyone's opinion is biased except ours. Colin?
Where does young Frankenstein fit in the Frankenstein multiverse?
Oh, shut up. Daniel, you have to
and
say something.
and I'm Dracula.
And we don't know what the episode's going to be, but there will be an episode next week.